Hello, this is Today in EVE Online. It is September 18th. All right, let's start at the beginning. We've been looking...
Make sure everyone's taken their anxiety meds.
Yes, we're still in the chaos era where pilots will need anxiety medication to stay focused. How's it going? We have with us Caleb. How you doing?
Hey guys.
We're going to have an exploration of what's going on. Right now, there seems to be a big offensive going on in the south with tests taking over or hitting the iHub in the staging system for Fraternity. That is a big, important battle that is going to come up. So we'll get you more information on that tonight. And we'll also get you more information on Sunday when we have the leader of Army of Mango on, if we can get him. So we'll try to work that out. Lux just joined us. How's it going, Lux?
Yeah, good.
Now, if I remember correctly, what's going on out there, by the way? Have you guys seen anything?
Armchair development is going crazy.
Yeah.
Well, rather it's player base trying to help CCP come up with actual, real good ideas. And it is kind of good, and there's some really, really gold out there. There's a lot of nonsense too, but I have seen so many well-meaning and good ideas, and I really hope CCP takes this to heart and starts considering that this might actually be some of the things we need, and then do roundtables, do some proper deving.
Okay, first of all, proper deving is done all the time at CCP, right? Second of all, the players don't know fuck about a lot of things. And third of all, I don't want to play a game that the players are developing. I am.
Are we going to fight this already?
Yeah, I don't want to compete against other players. I want to compete against other players. I don't want the players to compete against CCP. I don't want CCP to compete against me. I want them to do what they do and us to do what we do. Okay.
Do we need sources of a list of all the oops, this is fucking crap deving? Because I think I can find a lot.
Okay, well, how much debris is there from crap deving from players? Can we quantify that?
Well, we can yell "Rourke" in unison, and then everyone can just pile in.
Brought on by players who demanded that thing be useful.
Yeah, okay, fine. You're right. You're right. Yeah. There is a lot of the slow player lobbying for quality of life changes, and can we please have this, and please have this, and mommy and daddy giving in. I agree. You're completely fucking right. That happened. And this is right, the conclusion. This is the result. The fucking kids have shut the floor, and someone needs to clean up. Oh. And that's the janitors or the devs' assignment, right?
This is the sound
interesting
of.
Is
hold on. This is a sound. Hold on. This is a sound of a big virtual hug, Caleb. Okay, go ahead, Lex.
Well, it's just more interesting to me that instead of just reading on Reddit, we're actually trying to talk about, well, how do we actually fix the state that we're in? I think this is a positive move from the community.
It shows that the babies still love mommy and daddy, even though mommy and daddy is angry that they shut the floor.
All right, well, let's talk about, let's be more specific about what we're talking about. This is a post by a Goon Swarm Federation person called Angry Mustache. I think... Who is Angry Mustache? That is not just... I've heard that name before, and I think it's an alt or somebody writes under that.
There's at least 3 or 4 posts up there that's already coming up with some really good stuff. I just want to point to Hilmar's tweet earlier where he's talking about how all these things have to be this procedurally generated complex stuff, and it's going to take years and years. And it's like... And I just tweeted at him that that's actually wrong, because in nature... all of these systems are fairly simple in design. It's pretty much all either a positive feedback system or a negative feedback system. And when you start connecting all these things so they are interdependent, back to the interdependency, suddenly shit happens. This is how the body works. It does not work in some huge table of complicated code. Not at all. It's extremely simple when you take all of it apart and look at the individual parts.
Just realized we left singing in stations up, changing that. Okay, I was listening to you.
I'm sure we can actually do this with music if you want. We just need Dunk to come help us do the stanzas and write the actual metrics. So
I think he has a soundboard.
Somewhere over the rainbow, maybe, Caleb?
All right, so something just popped up while we were on air just now is introduction of EVE Ether Wars Phase 2 winners. And this just got published like 3 minutes ago, it looks like, but it's something that we already knew because I think there was an email that came out about it. So this must be memorializing the winners of that competition. And just so people know, Ether Wars is a server technology that CCP is interested in, possibly serving as a technical foundation for EVE Online later, maybe in the next few years, that can handle thousands and thousands and thousands of players playing at the same time in the same place. So maybe that's an upgrade from the technology that they're using now, which is very good, but also crashes when too many players get into the systems. We're talking 6,000 players crashed it last year.
And it's a great example of what you were hinting at. CCP are not fucking incompetent. They do really actually know how to do this shit. They've been doing it for 16 years. And this is one of the envelopes they're pushing, right? The new tech. They keep refreshing this stuff. And we've gone from servers that were a joke to servers that can have fights of 5,000 people. No one else does this stuff. It's unfair to just completely point and laugh when they make mistakes, because they do, right? But they do keep pushing the envelope. They keep coming up with intelligent genius level designs. I keep saying that the fact that they haven't actually utilized the moon fracking design, which is the most brilliant in the history of node control ever, it's just sad, because this is maybe the main problem, that they make these brilliant ideas and they don't iterate on them. They don't finish them. It's like, come on, get it right. It's so good.
Mm-hmm. When they're good, they're good. So this server technology has to be tested, and so to incentivize the test, the first time they really just invited players to come, and I think 3,000 showed up. And then the second time, because CSM and people like Brisk, Rubal, and I think Villy were saying, hey, CCP, do this right, for God's sakes, incentivize it. So they incentivized it by, I believe, giving out some prizes. Was it a computer? It's all here in this dev blog that just came out a few minutes ago. So they incentivized it with some pretty cool stuff. I think there was a PC gaming computer that was really sharp, and also tickets to eVegas and all that kind of stuff. And guess how many people showed up?
Well, that's because CCP didn't take advantage of the obvious solution to this. You need to do this in the crowd way, right? You should do it exactly like when Gmail was launched, right? Do it with invites. Give everyone that actually signs up 3 invites, all right, and they will do the work for you.
Before we give CCP even more advice, let's look at what the advice we gave them did. How many people showed up? 3,000, I think. Well, 3,000 concurrent, about 4,000. So they might have picked up 1,000. I don't think that was a big difference.
No, it's not really enough to push the servers and really get them tested, I think.
Okay,
that's
so
also why
in this one case, and in just this one case, the players gave CCP advice on how to do something right, and CCP followed that advice, and there was really a very, very marginal difference. So I don't want to hear anymore how players are superior to CCP's ideas. There's just different ways of doing it, and as you've said, they need to do it right with different marketing and that sort of stuff. That might be true, but when it comes from a marketing professional, I think that's a bigger deal.
No, it's just the whole cumulative effect, the whole snowball effect that you get if you use something like player invites, right? Mm-hmm. It's been tested in so many environments. It's so effective, and the EVE player base, I suspect, is actually really good at exactly that, right? Because I think we hit these numbers because of word of mouth most.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think this exemplifies something I've always felt about EVE Online, and that is, and it was confirmed in other ways too, these guys don't travel well. People play EVE Online for their own reasons, and to think that you can just rally the guys with EVE famous people or with even CCP leading the charge to say, come on everybody, let's go do this other thing, it doesn't work. And I think that's something to look at. EVE players play EVE Online for their own reasons. It's not a big crowd. We're not a big community that all loves each other all the time and does stuff together. That is a very small fraction of this player the people who play EVE Online. I also won't call it a player base because I really like the way Hilmar described the people who play EVE Online as sediment at the bottom of a river. The river being all the people.
Yeah, he called us silt. I am literally fucking silt.
Salty.
Yeah.
I'm silty as fuck, and I'm not going to take this anymore. No, the point is, you and I and everyone in the world pretty much knows that multi-level marketing works. Why not be a little bit controversial and use a multi-level marketing scheme to actually promote this thing, and you incentivize it with prizes that are pretty much based on that model? That would be fun for so many reasons, right? Because it would be kind of the more engaged you are, the more you push the people underneath you to actually push further down the line, the more prizes you actually get. That would be so funny.
I mean, isn't it quite simple? If they wanted 10,000 people to try it, you don't pull it from EVE's small player base. You ask Pearl Abyss if they'll ask the BDO players to try it out.
Yeah. Yeah, they have
Plus the other thing,
quite a bit more.
I
Hey, McLeod.
would also like to say, hey man. Plus the other thing is, the last time, the first Aether Wars, there were people who weren't actually, players of EVE Online, who came along. So, maybe looking at the, who arrived this time versus who arrived last time, like to do this tech demo, like maybe there were less people from non-EVE kind of related sort of areas that weren't in the second one that were in the first one. So we may have actually increased the amount of people from EVE, that took part in this. We just, it just made up the numbers that weren't there from the previous one, that weren't from, an Eve related kind of thing. Because if you don't play Eve and the incentive to do it is you get skins in Eve, like it's not an incentive for you, right?
Right. Everybody plays for different reasons. I don't really collect skins except in certain circumstances. But it's not my gameplay. It's not a microtransaction that appeals to me.
Yeah,
but
and
other
I heard
people are crazy about those skins. They try to collect them all.
Yeah. But I heard a lot of feedback after the first one about people who were there from different IPs. They weren't Eve players, but they were there to sort of see the experience, to see what what Aether Wars is meant to be, what the actual tech was meant to be about, from Hadian. But from other IPs, not just from Eve. So, we could have increased the amount of people that went there. It's
Stretch
just
goals.
made up. But that was the other thing, to drive the numbers. How about stretch goals? You bring if we get 3,000, active players, then you get tier 1 kind of like rewards. If you get 5,000, you get tier 2. If you get 6,000, you get tier 3. That kind of
well,
thing. Really cool.
do
tournament ships.
Yeah, just
on the last stretch goal. Like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Tell them how to do it. Show them a document how it's done. One of the things that bothers me. I've been in like cyber management now for a few years, and one of the things that taxes me the most is when somebody gives me a suggestion without any backing. It's not written down. It's just kind of like a suggestion in the forums or whatever. And that kind of thing puts the onus on you. So now you've made a suggestion, and I got to take it and process it, and it takes a long time. But if you put a plan together and you hand it to them, it's a different thing. Now they have something that's actionable. It's already laid out. That's a different thing that you can work with. Suggestions are just like, okay, yeah, if I remember, I'll write it on.
But if something then sounds good to you, right? If something sounds interesting, then it's your responsibility to then grill that person for more details, because you do have to have an elevator pitch. You can't expect CCP to listen for hours on end, but if you get an elevator pitch that works and something sounds interesting, or wait, stretch goals, that might be an idea. Well, tournament ships, yeah, we have those. That's easy. Wait a minute, maybe we should talk to this guy and ask him for a few details, and then we will come up with a solution that we actually like in-house.
Yeah.
I think what's more interesting is, can the players as a community get together and take their suggestions, but then further than that, refine them and distill them together into something better, rather than just having hundreds of pages of suggestions, can we as players, as a community, use our diverse viewpoints to create better suggestions and good compromises?
We need CCP to be the moderator of that. This is what structures focus groups did. This is exactly what happened when structures were rolled out. We did all of that. We were looking at the stuff that CCP was suggesting. We were talking about what could break, what didn't work, which order of priority, what would be vital, what's like need to have, and what's nice to have. All of these things were done in the structures focus group, and CCP were doing a massive job actually making that work. The player base was sane, made sense, were polite, civil most of the time, and CCP always listened, and they always took anything in and actually considered it. That was an amazing experience for me, at least, because I've not seen CCP be this professional before and since.
Well, could we recreate that, Caleb, without CCP's input?
No, we can't. No.
No?
It's going to end up in a refest, and this is why there was self-moderation to some extent, but the presence of CCP alone made that self-moderation work. They don't really need to do much. They just need to be there and pretty much control the fucking speaking stuff.
Okay, so I'm just looking at Tweet Fleet right now. Some interesting stuff. You know that Hilmar is in Korea. It looks like he's at some kind of a conference. He's here on stage talking. But yesterday he was all over Twitter. There was somebody that wrote. Let's have a look at what Hilmar wrote.
He was doing a bit of trumping, really.
I don't know. Where's his replies? Anyway, so there was something that went up and it said he was not happy that CCP had caved, and I wrote, I wouldn't be happy either if it would lower my confidence in development. And then Hilmar responded saying it was always supposed to be an experiment, and we always meant it to be temporary. And here's the tweet right here. And you can see it started a discussion among other people. It was always planned to be a temporary event. It's a bit of a crude instrument. And I can just hear him saying crude. It's a bit of a crude instrument. And now clearly we know and understand what the value of more sophisticated one is. So the value of a more sophisticated technique for doing what they needed to do. That blackout was too oppressive for too many people and had all kinds of unintended consequences for players that weren't necessarily part of umbrellas, if that was the only goal.
It was trying to repair clocks with a fucking mallet.
Okay, so he goes on to say that operating on the current stagnation that has set in over the years will require different tools and approaches than what we created them in the first place. So I'm not sure I completely understand that, but he is saying that however we came to here, we can't take that road back. You can't unwind the stuff you've done.
He's basically saying they can't just unroll what's being done. They have to actually do stuff moving forward to change it, right?
He's talking about a new Eden that regenerates itself, as he's talked about before with us and at FanFest, which is a completely different approach to developing things than they've done in the past. I mean, when they initially made Eve, they did work some of that in, but fundamentally they want to do that more now. It's a really, really good move, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very enlightened in that you can't just nerf the game back to health, and that because, as you've seen, just doing a blanket approach affects too many other things as well. It created some interest. I liked it. I was for it. I think it didn't go on long enough. However, there's no ignoring that it was incredibly oppressive to certain people, and not just the people who were doing the obscene amount of money making, but people who wanted to be more pedestrian in nullsec. So a lot of the quiet people I've heard were the ones that were saying, well, I can't really do much, so I'm taking off. And once you break the Eve habit, it really opens you up to picking up a new habit. I think it was a friend of mine basically gave me a really good analogy. You don't want a customer to leave a store. When they leave a store, they can't buy any product. You need them to stay in the store. And that's why you have food marts now inside of shopping centers. You've always had that maybe with food courts, but now you have, like IKEA, you have the food place inside the store itself. In Walmart, you have a Starbucks inside the store itself. They don't want you to go for any reason. They need to keep you in that store because in that store, you have the potential to actually buy something. And when you're out of the store, you don't. And the same thing goes with EVE Online. You want to keep people in the game because as soon as they leave the game for more than, I imagine, a week or two, they start to look at other options for entertainment, etc. A lot of video gaming is repetitive habits, right? Habits is almost a type of memory. You can actually lose part of your memory, but if you have a habit, you will continue to function. There's some books on that sort of thing. Okay. Another thing that he says is, Dirk McGurk says, I'd imagine it would require a mix of nerfing things and then creating new tools. Some things can be reversed or turned back, nerfed. Others will require new imaginative methods. But overall, it will require a holistic view given the interconnected nature of the world. So Dirk McGurk's agreeing with him, and he responds, this is true for all social economies, be they real world or virtual world. Operating on such a complicated, interconnected situation is done by taking steps and monitoring effects. And Dirk says 100%. I couldn't agree more. And so what's happening there is Hilmar is saying that it will take a combination, but when you're this interconnected, you need data. And that's what one of the things that has been happening in this chaos era is experimentation, data collection, refined hypothesis. That's the cycle.
This is why I told you about how titration works, right? You want to do this in a slow and drip feed way. You want to change things in the environment in a slow way so you can actually get data. And you will see the turning point arise at a very specific point. And this can be done with pretty much everything. How slow the diminishing return mechanism needs to be for anomalies to actually get people to change their behavior. Things like that. You don't bring a mallet to fix a clock. That's just dumb.
Yeah. So it goes on a little further here, which is interesting because Commander A's jumps in there. And Commander A's recently has left the game. His corporation, or at least half of them, have left the game because of blackout. And they have said they're not coming back for, I guess they don't trust CCP, I think was the reason given. And also Commander A's isn't coming back for possibly the same reason. So he says, so 2 lessons. Effective communication is the hallmark of understanding each other's objectives, and Sledgehammer isn't the best tool for installing a picture frame. I think I would have been happier with an iteration on local, like a 15-second delay, than a full reversal. Okay, let me just say, everybody talks about that 15-second delay. I haven't really seen a good explanation for it, but whatever. It's just an imaginative thing, because bots can wait 15 seconds before they figure out what they need to do. Like, it's not a big deal. Okay, and so Hilmar responds, first, we complete the event. Then we analyze the outcome. Then we make the more refined change. Having middle step in between was discussed, but we are sticking to the process. Thank God. So they did, and I know they do, analyze things, the same things that players say. They analyze them and they rule them out. The players always think that CCP hasn't thought of something. I assure you they have. Yeah, so Freelancer and Commander A's is left. I don't know if he'll come back or not, but he ran for CSM more than a few times. I think he ran for 5 or 6 times and stuff. So he's very invested in the game. He's very much somebody that cared for the game. He's also a hero for saving EVE Vegas because he was able to leverage his real life in and call somebody at the customs department to say, hey, something's stuck at the customs department and it's going to really screw up this convention. So that he brought attention to something that they were able to fix instead of the standard 3 or 4 or 5 days, which would have meant equipment for CCP for EVE Vegas would not have arrived on time. It would have arrived possibly after the convention was over. But thanks to Commander A's, he was able to get some attention to it. They fixed it. They got their equipment, and he was the hero of the day. That was last year's convention.
I would like to point out that he did get some real life backlash from that.
Well, he got backlash because I think somebody reported some Eve player reported him for leveraging his real life work into the game, and
and even
not
though
good.
he did it in a completely fine and proper way, he still got real life backlash for that, and that's although you may find that funny, like that's screwing with his his financial situation.
Yeah. Well, the problem is Eve players can think that total war means no holds barred. In other words, you do anything you want to your opponent or people you don't like, and that's not right. You were gonna say, Lux?
Yeah.
I was just going to say I hate when the Eve players do this level of metagaming, and it makes me particularly angry actually when they aim it at CCP to try to strategically manipulate them into changing the game or not changing the game in the way that benefits themselves most. It makes me really angry actually. There are not many things make me angry.
Yeah.
How did we get to this suddenly?
Well, I like that.
No, honestly, like because suddenly we just went to that, like when we went from Eve players screwing over another
Metagaming
Eve
real
player that's
people.
just trying to help some CCP out.
All right, I fear I've set a bad example by arguing with Caleb, so I want to just say let's chill out, talk Eve.
Park it.
Yeah, park it. Let's get on with it. Okay, so here's Hilmar's reply to that. He says, first we complete the event. Now, in this case, the event was blackout. Then we analyze the outcome. So they're going to analyze the data, whether they lost players or not, or was it good for smashing bots? It certainly was good for smashing bots, and they certainly did lose some players. We just don't know how many. Then we make a more refined change, having the middle step in between was discussed, but we are sticking to the process, and that's that. I'll give that a heart. But here's the next part that I think is interesting from Juliana Soter. I don't know who that is.
He's one of the biggest RPers in the Glente militia.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, so he comes and says, I concur with the CCP plan here. Execute like a binary search algorithm. Iterate through extremes. Then process through intermediate values between these extremes. Reduces search time if you're concerned about correcting a vast problem, botting AFK empires. And Hilmar says, that is a very good way to phrase it. Spot on.
Except it's not.
Yeah, that's damaging to consumer bases completely and utterly.
That's like saying that it's okay to test your medicine drug without doing an LD50. You don't do that. Just don't do that. You're going to lose players.
Well, some people like cough medicine and can't stop drinking it even when they don't have a cold, and some people hate the taste. Like, it just depends on
That's just licorice and morphine. It's been tested. It's got no lethal effects. Go crazy.
Have as much as you want. I wonder if CCP devs who are famous for loving licorice would like some cough syrup instead. How funny.
Well, the cough serum in most Scandi countries, I'm pretty sure, is the licorice with morphine thing, and it's pretty strong. Don't drink the entire bottle; you will be shit.
Yeah. So, but I like what he says. This Julianus. I think I have to read it a few times to kind of understand what he's saying, but that's my limitation, not his. And certainly Hilmar understood what he was saying and said, "Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about."
He's saying go to the extremes to find the pressure point, and it works in many things. It's just it's not very good when you're talking about something that's customer based and an ecosystem and pretty almost biological in nature. You don't test like this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Manic Velocity says something's very interesting here, and I think we can jump on this. And players are paying for the privilege of being the guinea pigs.
That's pretty much Caleb's point there.
Right.
Most will get sick of being the guinea pigs and will stop playing.
Really?
That seems to be how game development works these days, isn't it? Everything comes out in alpha and beta, and then we're all guinea pigs.
That's getting people to buy in willingly.
That's essentially what the whole open, the paid alpha bullshit is about. Like people have started to shy away from paid alphas because you know, they're basically unfinished products that are being tested on people.
Well, what about this whole way of
People have to
life that
actually
we?
buy into
What about
to it.
this? Sorry. What about this whole way of life that we have, where you go about your daily life using free tools, and all that data is collected from you, right? And they are constantly iterating on what gets you to be even more habitual about using their product, with really little regard for if it's good for you or not. They're just trying to keep you in, right? Every video that comes up on YouTube is twisted and turned a little bit to make you want to click it, to have a little bit more time on their platform. Like, this is happening all over the world. Why would you be offended if video games were doing the same thing?
Because they're not using, because they're not vying for your time to sell you, like, you know, advertisements. They're basically trying to peddle an unfinished product, and then they don't, because they're already getting income from that. They don't have the
Not
like
if you're free to
they don't get the
play.
incentive to finish the product, because they're already getting the income that they would
He's
from a
talking about
finished
early
product.
access.
Lux, you were going to jump in here, and then Ashtarothi can take it away.
I was going to say that any game or product that's in active development can be seen as an unfinished product. And basically, if they're taking the data from their users to find out, what makes people want to use that product more, what smooths using it for them, I know that should be somewhat welcomed, as long as it doesn't violate your privacy too much, because it signals they're trying to make it better.
That to some degree makes sense in terms of, like, you know, persistent long-term MMOs, but like, it's not like persistent long-term MMOs is not the standard in the gaming industry. The standard in the gaming industry is a single product that's pushed out, and then a sequel is developed after that. When the product is only half finished.
But MMOs don't work that way,
dude.
Right?
I literally just said that MMOs aren't the the standard thing in the gaming industry. It's the single use product, and that's the reason why this particular form of development has been prevalent in the gaming industry, is because it works, or has seemed to work for single use or single developed products with, and then and then like what is it, like, sequels being developed from that.
Sorry, dude, I was reading when you said that. That's why I missed that. Ash?
I was just going to clarify. It sounds to me like, so we were talking about rapid iteration, biological systems, and all that kind of stuff. What was being talked about right there is early access, which is a totally different, but yet in the same kind of category of problem, where a lot of developers, developers will put out a part of their game early so that way they can get some money while they are building the rest of the game. The bad news is that several companies several game developers have decided, or through mistake or intention, whatever, to not finish the product once it's been purchased. And that's a whole different problem, but it does actually come from a lot of the same stuff, in the fact that when a developer doesn't really know, when they run into a design problem, they have an idea in their head of what they want to see happen, but the player base are just not biting into it. They're not responding in the way that they would like to see. You have to actually, get pretty creative about how to fix that. And the problem is that those answers don't actually exist most of the time. And so a lot of games do kill themselves trying to fix systemic problems.
Yeah, this is something that is true in real life and education right now. My wife's involved heavily in education, and one of the things that they say when they're training for teaching is that right now you're teaching kids for jobs that don't exist yet. And in fact, some of the way that schools are set up is completely wrong for the future. In other words, if you go to university, they're trying to get you prepared for a discipline, or school in general is trying to get you to answer a calculation. It's trying to get you to use information that you have and get to an answer. That's something that computers can do far better than we can. The thing that computers cannot do is the liberal arts. They can't think laterally in creative ways to figure out how something in nature can work in this very technological, work out this technological problem. They can't creative problem solve. Only humans are able to do that. And that's where the future is. So a lot of the education is not based on drilling your multiplication tables as much anymore as understanding what math is and what it's trying to do with heavy use of word problems. And that seems to be not only true for what's happening now, because careers now, if you're looking for a job, you don't need to be a specialist anymore. At least in technology, you just need to be somebody they can mold, somebody that has enough table stakes, they call it, enough technological know-how to get involved in what they're doing, and then they can mold you into where they need you, because you need to be incredibly flexible. Software comes and goes too fast for you to be a specialist unless you work for the company that produces that. And the same thing is happening in the future with children and education. Now, we can continue this later after the show in Talking in Stations Discord. I want to move on to talk about what's actually happening in the game so we can do more of that instead of theorizing on how the game should be built. Ashtrathi, can you tell us, or Lux, what's going on with these invasions?
Yeah, so it kind of started about 2 weeks ago. Maybe a little bit, maybe not that long. Either way, when we got the September patch, one of the patch notes was that the Rasnabor or the Triglavian have moved into low sec. Just prior to there, we got the Rasnabor. We've talked about those quite a bit. The day of the September patch, we started seeing the emergent conduits. I'm not sure how much we've actually discussed those yet. They're basically like a new kind of anomaly that can be ran in various high sec systems. And then on Wednesday, we saw one of the most dramatic changes to the invasions in the fact that we saw 3 new invasions spawn with a foothold in low sec that were adjacent to high sec systems. But then, as those things iterated through, as of yesterday, every invasion in the game was either in deep low sec or through low sec in order to run them. And they've ground to a halt. Meanwhile, on the other side, because of these emergent conduits and the amount of salvage that is coming out of them, we've actually seen salvage from Triglavians drop significantly across the board in the last 3 days, as trade has upwards of tripled for the salvage. So obviously, those emergent conduits have become incredibly popular among some people.
Alex,
I mean,
go ahead.
what I like most about them is how accessible they are for the players. So you can just jump into one. You don't need to scan it down. It's just an anomaly, and it scales up to 3 players. So if someone else jumps in there with you, you don't really mind because they'll get an equal reward as well. It's not like they're reducing the reward that you're getting, which I like that sort of design because it gives people an opportunity to play together rather than seeing the person as a direct competitor and telling them to sod off. So that's one of the nicest elements of the design in my mind.
Yeah, the emergent conduits themselves can be ran by a solo battlecruiser or battleship, depending on what kind of skills and whatnot that you have. Like the Drekovic, for example, has become a very popular runner for these ships, as has several battleships. Either way, the nice thing about it is while you can solo it, if somebody comes into your site, they don't actually reduce your reward, as he was pointing out. A single person will get 4.5 million, 300 LP for each site completed. That is the same is true for 1, 2, or 3 players. It isn't until you get 4 players or more that you start to divide the reward. Now,
and then they just spawn quicker because there's 1 per system, and they respawn after they're finished. So
correct.
it actually increases the reward that you're getting to do it with other people.
Right. It increases the rate in which you can do them because, they spawn exactly 1 minute after the previous one is completed. there are two little caveats, especially that come when it comes to Zoria. First of all, Zoria loot is the biggest jackpot out of these things, right? So if Zoria drops the skill book or the correct mutaplasmid or whatever, it can be worth as much as 6 or 7 sites together, right? But the problem is that obviously that is a single loot drop. So if you do have a stranger, then there is a little bit of tension over the Zoria loot, but ultimately that's pretty rare. And it'd be like as if, actually I can't even think of a good example. It'd be like if you could rat and like everybody gets the exact same reward, but if there's a rare spawn, then that has to be fought over, that kind of thing.
It gets you talking to the person in the side as well, right? Like I
true.
dropped into one and the guy just said to me, "Oh, just link me what drops."
And then the other thing about Zoria is that in the final wave, if you leave the Zoria for last, for any reason, they will warp off. The Zoria's Vedmak will run if you kill all of their bodyguards.
They retreat.
So, yeah.
That's
so
pretty cool.
make sure to, I mean, obviously there's a lot of E-War. You might need to clear off some of the other stuff first, but make sure to not clear the Zoria last. You have to kill Zoria before the last other rat. The only other thing is the same with the rest of the Raznaborg. The ones without a name, the ones that are just Raznaborg Kiki, Raznaborg Damovic, those are the same as the liminals from the invasions. So they do very high EM kinetic, where everybody else does explosive therm. So if you're taking a lot of extra damage, keep an eye out for those Raznaborg, especially the Raznaborg Kiki that don't have some other E-War like starving or tangling or ghosting or whatever.
Wow. And you've been having a lot of fun doing these, right? I've seen your guys.
Yeah. Well, so the nice thing about this is like these things right here, this is the friendship machine in action, right? So you have a single guy who's running it, especially if it's an experienced dude running his Drakovec. He's just in a single site or in a single system running the sites over and over again for a few hours. Eventually somebody else wanders in, sees that Anom, warps to it, doesn't really know what's going on, goes in, maybe does, whatever. He's in a ship that survives long enough. Well, now the two of them are running this thing together. That's a positive interaction. They're now working together. That is not something that happens very often in EVE, where it's a good idea to work with a stranger who has just landed in your site.
That's what I was talking about yesterday in Talking Stations Discord. I put out there that because I think Area said they need more conflict drivers, which is something that you would hear. It's a very common suggestion to CCP. And by the way, I like Arya. He's a very, very competent guy. But I jumped on it and said, let's get past this conflict driver thing. Like everybody wants conflict drivers. Okay, I get that. But those are people who are interested in conflict. What we need is like, and I said the wrong word for it. I said, we need some
cooperation drivers.
No, we need some uncertainty drivers. And I don't think that's what I meant. I meant we need situations that can go different ways. Not am I going to kill you or run from you?
Right.
But something that can, some mechanics, I don't know, it would have to be game design that allows us to make different choices and different opportunities to make different choices.
Right. To do the right or the wrong thing and get rewarded differently depending on which one you choose.
The invasions as content are very much like that. I can go into one of Ash's sites and I can choose to help him or I can choose to sabotage him.
Yeah.
And it'll take us several minutes of figuring out which one he's trying to do and what we want to do about it.
It depends on the day.
Yeah.
Most of this is completely worthless for the people that are playing this game for its USP, right? It's more PvE and it's shiny and it might be fun, but the fundamental of this game is focused on the PvP aspect. We want this game to be about interacting even aggressively with other players, right? I know I'm being null-centric here, but we have this huge player base that are being ignored with broken game design that want to have something change the game get them to play again because it's just dead and
It's
stale.
not broken game design. It's they've reached the players have figured out how to outsmart the system. It doesn't mean it's broken. It means that it's outdated for the aggressiveness of people figuring things out. But what
Ash might explain to you how he actually has to deal with people like me.
That's true. Those are definitely conflict.
Mhm.
Yeah, last night with Falarin, that was very, very frustrating. But the thing is this. You know what the real conflict driver in EVE Online is? There's only one. Other players. Right?
Yeah.
There's no other players, there's no conflict. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how many moons there are, doesn't matter how many citadels there are, doesn't matter how many things CCP puts in the game. If there's not enough people to fight over it, then there's no fight, right? So what we're seeing here is CCP trying to figure out how to give us more people and better quality people and more organized people. So like I said, a stranger in a site running this site, he now has another person comes in. Those guys, that's a positive. That can be a positive interaction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying that
if
people
one or the
have
other
been saying this similar to you for 8 years, and it's gone in the direct opposite direction. We've not seen the growth that you guys have been promising for new interacting and exciting PvE. On the contrary, you've seen people just leave the game.
No, that's not true. In fact, the opposite is true. We've had this epic wars, bring in the people, get the headlines mantra for years now, since at least 2011. And this is the limitations of it, right?
Right now, if you want to be recruited into an organization, if you want to join an organization from not being in an organization, there's basically one collection of choices, which are the null blocks and other big alliances that have their name out there enough for people to find. Sorry, you have one other option, or a bunch of no-name corps with a CEO who has no idea what they're doing, and probably one guy who likes to pretend like he's smart that doesn't know the answer to anything. That's what I have found in my experience. So, like I said, here, in this case, these two people who are interacting, if they work together and they start to work together long term, if they start to gain respect for each other because they see the benefit of having another person in their site with them, they go faster, they work together for things, they start coordinating on which wrecks to salvage. Soon they're friends, right? If they get a third person, they still get rewarded.
Then they kill that one.
Right?
Yeah.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No, it's the fourth. The fourth is the one where you start splitting the loot. So, or splitting the reward. So you get a third person. Now I've got these three people that are all working together. You know what that is? That's a frigate abyss team. That's the core of a corp. That's the beginning of a three-man squad roaming around in LowSec. These people want to grow into those other things, but they have to start somewhere. And they have to meet people. And they have to meet people on a level that doesn't make them repulsed by them.
It's like a party. I used to throw a lot of parties here in LA, and I used to have a bunch of artists and film people coming over, but none of them knew each other. Oh, and some students from university, but they didn't really know each other. So you had to actually find a clever way, because I was running around introducing people. That wasn't enough, because this was a lot of people. So what I did is I took a poem and then or a picture, a graphic that I had made, and I cut it like a puzzle. And so and then I handed that out. I don't know where I got this idea. I don't think it was mine. And it was go up to someone and you have a reason to talk to them. You can say, hey, do you have the other side to this puzzle? And it allowed people to approach. But that wasn't enough to make them friends or to get them into a conversation. But it was an excuse for you to talk to anybody you wanted to in that place. And it turns out there was a really good mix of people. Might have been the liquor that did that, but whatever. I think you need reasons. You need reasons to step over that void of how do I contact this person? Are they going to reject me? Are they not going to talk to me? There's a lot of fear involved in that. So if you can get anyone over saying we have a common goal, I don't know you, but we have a common goal, I think that's a plus.
So I also want to tell one other story that has to do with all of this, which is from the invasion side. Going to what Lux's point, right? We have people coming and ninja salvaging all the time. All the time. The loot is pretty good. So we usually have, it's not uncommon to have at least one guy in there. And it's very frustrating, right? Because there's not very much we can do. If we suicide gank him, we get kill right for a month. It's a pain in the butt, right? So a few times, one time in particular, we had this guy named Sam Spock who was coming in and he's salvaging our stuff. And I finally was like, dude, man, why don't you just join the corp or join the group and salvage for us, and we'll give you a cut. He was like, all right. That dude is one of my most consistent pilots now. He comes almost every day in his Ikki Tursa for at least a few hours and runs invasions with us. He was ninja salvaging off of us. We took that opportunity and we turned him into one of our best, most consistent pilots.
Don't give him roles.
Of course not.
Don't
He's not
give
even in
him
the corp.
roles.
But
It's too
but you get what
Did
I'm saying.
did you recruit those guys from Lowsec as well?
Oh no. I put that video up, by the way. But and we've had this many times before because we have all kinds of different people. Like we've had a guy, Jeremy, who showed up and was salvaging, and he kept like being really sketchy. Like we invited him to the fleet and then he dropped out again and like all this other stuff. Turns out he had less than a week worth of time in the game. And he legitimately did not feel that he was holding his weight. And so he didn't want to be like in the fleet in order to like get part of the reward because he thought that he didn't deserve it. So I had to sit him down and be like, look, first of all, you're doing a good job. You're in the fleet. You're doing what we need to do. You're part of the team. You get the reward. Second of all, dropping my fleet while on grid with us is super sketch and will probably get you killed a lot faster.
That's interesting. All right. Well, I think that's all interesting. And by the way, when I put that example out there, someone named Kuhn Exar said there was an example that he'd heard of, I think, where pirates have come across some miners and instead of destroying them, they had the miners mine for them. I thought that was great. And it's, that people have done silly stuff too. I don't know if you consider that silly, but having people on your comms to sing, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stuff in the game. Just like those pirates, they found these miners and the pirates didn't want to mine, but the pirates needed some ore. So they're like, we won't kill you, but if you mine that, give us like half of it and you'll be cool in this area. And those are the kinds of things that are interesting to me, that it's not just about, I've spotted someone, I know how to kill them, I'm going to kill them, I killed them, my kill board went up by 1. That to me is, after a while, gets to be too repetitive because counting gold in your coffers or counting ISK in your bank account or counting your kill board, after a while doesn't mean anything. And actually, it's not a very good measure of really what you're capable of and who you are and stuff. And I think to distinguish yourself, they need more choices. And also, I think immersion requires that you do more than just kill things all the time. And then it's a video game.
I would argue that if you want to truly affect the sandbox past a certain level, you're going to need people to trust you and people who you can influence, not people who you kill.
Right. Well, I guess that's what all the high level leadership is all about, right? It's that you've developed trust, you've developed reputation, and that takes a long time to earn because you need opportunities to earn it, to show that you make the good decisions each time.
And that's the thing. Like, we don't just need new bros. We need new corps.
Yes.
We need new growing administrations. We need new leaders. We need new theologies. We need new experiments. This is why things like war deck changes, invasions, the emergent conduits, all these different things. I think that in the long term, these are going to help out in null and low and all this stuff because guess what? In like a month or two, these guys are going to be rich and interested in figuring out what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yep. We have someone in the audience that keeps talking.
I mean, already,
yeah.
I have a high sec corp, right? Mm-hmm. So it was my expectation that when it came to low sec, people would be like, no, we're not doing it. Like I thought that I was going to have to protect my people from having to be projected into that if they didn't want to, if that made them nervous, if that made them uncomfortable, especially people who have been in the game for a long time, because I know that we have some like true blue high sec players in there. Mm-hmm. So when the invasion was 2 jumps through low sec, and I'm like, I don't know, guys, I don't know if it's a good idea for us to bring our expensive equipment through there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if everybody will want it. And literally to a man, every single person that was in our fleet was like, no, Ash, we should go. You're the chump if you don't want to go. I'm like, holy shit, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's do this. Like these guys they're not like, oh my God, I don't want to do PvP. It's more like, they want to make sure that they know how to do it right. Mm-hmm. They know that they want to be able, when they go into it, they want to know that they are not just getting into a trap. And Eve teaches you that there's like millions of traps everywhere. So until they can feel confident, they're not going to go. But once they do, they really, really want to.
Yeah. Well, I think that everybody that plays EVE Online has a different reason for playing it, but there are some commonalities between what actually motivates people and not just in the game, but also in real life. And that is to feel like you're a contributor and to be a part of something. I think those are powerful. Some people play to relax and not to be a part of anything, and I totally understand that as well. They want to chill out and just hear the sounds of the virtual landscape. Other people want to feel social, and of the social people, you want to have some kind of opportunity to distinguish yourself. That's got to be a big part of why people stick around and play with each other over a long period of time. And the good thing about MMOs, and especially EVE Online, is it's one universe, and it has an intact history. The history that the mark that you make will resound not only in your era, but in the eras in front of you. We still talk about FCs or players who did remarkable things that happened 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah, every time that somebody listens to our podcast, part of that is the promise that you could be the name that we're mentioning now. Or better yet, you could be one of us.
Mhm.
I was you guys once. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I was just some dude that barely could understand what the hell I was doing, and then somebody invited me to come and talk about it.
I was sitting there listening to your podcast, Ashtarothi, hydrostatic podcast, and I when I discovered it, I went back and listened to the 5 or 6 episodes I'd missed before while I was doing some landscaping at my home, and it kept me company throughout that whole time. And I was like super happy to be attached to EVE Online while I was doing other things. So we all can make a difference, and it's God, this sounds like a Hallmark moment, but we really are motivated to make that difference. I wouldn't be doing all this if it weren't for the idea that somebody was getting some benefit out of it. And I think it all revolves around EVE Online. Okay, we are probably out of time. Go ahead, Ash.
I'll just say that back in the day, when somebody complained about a lack of content, you would just tell them that we make our own content. I would challenge us all to remember that again.
Yeah, Manic Velocity, the dream of becoming EVE famous. Yeah, it's a powerful dream. A lot of people want to do it, I think. I don't know. And people find different ways to do it. If you've listened to every, who is that? Mopar Mike, 312. I've listened to every TIS cast, I think. If you have listened to over, I forget, but I think we're over 400 shows now. And I was just looking at YouTube, and YouTube in the last 28 days alone, we've clocked 1 million hours of listening. And I didn't even know how that was possible. I think it takes thousands of people watching it.
1 million minutes?
1 million minutes, sorry. 1 million minutes. Yeah, so that's thousands of people watching a long period of time. I think it takes averages, though, of course. But that's a lot in 28 days, right? That's a lot. So there's a lot of material coming out of Talking Stations for you guys. Okay, anything else, guys? We've got to go. We'll be back tomorrow. But today in EVE Online, we told you there's some action going on in test.
We need competition, by the way. So some other creatives out there, please start making some media content.
Yeah, legitimately. I thank you for mentioning that, Caleb. I've been wanting to say this for a little while. You know, we do need more content creators, in particular podcasters. So if you're hearing this and you're like, holy crap, I wouldn't mind talking out my butt about Eve for an hour or two at a time. I think I could do that. But you're too afraid about the technical stuff about it, please contact myself or Matterall or really any of us. All of us would be more than happy to give you the advice, perhaps, point you towards the tools, teach you how to use those tools. Or, I mean, depending on how nice you are in Matterall, he might be able to
especially
give you more.
I just refer everybody to McLeod, who knows how to do everything.
And no niche is too nerdy. There's a room for everything. You can talk about the most nerdy, petty thing that no one actually understands, and eventually it's going to pick up some viewers, and someone will find it interesting. I'm not going to say that Noisy is necessarily niche, but that's pretty much how he started doing his thing, and he is like famous now.
Yeah, my biggest advice for that is, especially when you're starting out, just do it to do it. Don't do it for the numbers. Don't do it to be popular. Don't do it, whatever, because you'll defeat yourself before you even get started, right? You'll look at the numbers and be like, oh my God, it's only, But, if you're doing it for yourself, if you're just doing it because you're like,
Yeah.
that's what's going to make you get across the finish line.
Yeah, contact TIS. We'll help you out. We'll help you get started. We want to be fans of yours. We want to listen to what you have to say, large or small experiences. It's amazing how interesting players can be, their real life self, but also what they do in the game, what they get up to is really interesting. It doesn't have to be epic wars all the time. The little stories are actually some of the most interesting stories. Okay, with that, I want to just say this last thing. Talking in Stations, you want to know what the voice says at the end of Talking in Stations intro. If you're watching the video, you'll see there's an epic battle scene. And at the very end, you'll hear some foreign alien language say some things, and then we come into the show. That was supposed to be the Talking in Stations that is found in Galente Stations. You can hear that in the background. It's a sound sample of the background voices that you hear in Galente Stations. It's one of 2 or 3 voices that they have recorded. So that's what that was.
It's Matt. He was pretty much recording the swinger party next door when he was in his captain's quarters.
Yeah, it's so that's what that is. It's actually in the game. You can hear it in Galente Stations. We just took that sound clip and broadcast it at the end there. So that's what that is. Doesn't actually mean anything unless CCP has a meaning for it that we don't know about. The other thing, if you listen to the podcast version only, the music that you hear is an instrumental version of a song that was important to me when I was younger. It's from Depeche Mode. It's 80s era music that I liked. It was dark wave, which is what I listened to, and that one was called "But Not Tonight," which doesn't have anything to do with this. It's just a reminder of myself as a younger person, and I thought if the show is going to be completely formed around what I like, then that's what I like, and so I put it there, and I think it's worked out. Nobody's ever said that they don't like the music. In fact, some people have come around to liking it after a while, but it is kind of up and poppy, which is totally different than the video version of the show. I thought that was funny. Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. We will see you tomorrow. That's all we have for Talking in Stations today in EVE Online. We'll see you tomorrow.